Krish, the world is understandably agonising over questions like, will Putin invade Ukraine? If he does, when? What will NATO do? They are important questions, of course, but the fact that those conversations are happening at all is arguably a win for Moscow in itself. As for us today, we've just come back from the front line of an ongoing conflict between Russian separatists and Ukraine. We spent the day speaking to young soldiers there. And I can tell you one thing, they are not asking the question, when will the next war start? They are asking the question, when will this one end? Once upon a time, the town of Shirokna was a seaside resort. The war between Ukraine and Russian separatists has gone on here for 8 years now. The town, on today's front line, has gone from wish you were here to keep out landmines. The fighting is sporadic, the concern constant, that if there was a Russian invasion and it came through this region, these young soldiers would be the first to feel it. We're escorted by the Ukrainian army into the trenches to a point just meters from Russian separatist forces. So we're about 30 or 40 meters or so from Russian separatists, just up over the bank of the trenches here. If Moscow decided to invade Ukraine in this direction, this would literally be the first point of entry. These trenches run through what were people's back gardens. But no one lives here anymore, just soldiers and wild dogs tamed by war. At the closest point to separatists, a huddle of young soldiers. What age were you when the war started in 2014?
13.
Okay.
11. 20 років.
So you're all really quite young. How do you feel about the prospect, talk of another war?
Я також думаю, що все може бути. Ми повинні бути готові до всього. Тому що, я впевнений, що щось та й буде, але коли, треба чекати.
Did the war back in 2014 influence your decision to join the army?
Я хотів захистити свою батьківщину, захистити своїх близьких, тому що ніхто не знає, що буде далі.
Their main focus was snipers not far away, rather than Russian troops further away. But the more senior-ranking soldiers we spoke to felt that there wouldn't be an invasion, or at least that it wasn't imminent.
Я думаю, що наразі Путін не готовий до повномасштабного вторгнення, так як для цього треба дуже багато ресурсів і фінансувань. А в них з цим трошки. Я думаю, що і погода не дуже благоприятна. Мені здається, що цього не буде. Він не наважиться на це.
During summers back in the day, people would travel a few miles along the coast to the beaches of Shirokna, from the port city of Mariupol. There, the Marine Guards support the Ukrainian Navy, a watchful eye over the frozen Azov Sea. Mariupol port, this horizon, another possible front line. Just to give you a sense of where we're at on the ground here, over there, a few miles along the coast, is where the Russian separatists are in Donbass. Then, out to sea in this direction, over in the distance, the Crimean Peninsula, and crucially, the Strait of Kerch, giving you access to this sea. And then, of course, Mariupol port itself. Mariupol is on the Sea of Azov. It connects to the Black Sea via the Strait of Kerch. The annexed Crimean Peninsula is here. At the moment, Russians allow commercial ships through the strait, but not Ukrainian military vessels. If the Russians invaded Mariupol by sea, for example, they could, in theory, connect separatist-controlled Donbass to an occupied Mariupol. If there was a Russian invasion, what would you expect to see out at sea here?
Висадка як малих суден десантних, малих катерів, так і великих десантних кораблів. І наша задача вчасне виявлення цих кораблів і повідомлення берегових сил, як артилерії, так і повітряних сил.
They're made of tough stuff down Mariupol way, including their soldiers. The tough questions for them are not, will Putin invade, and if so, when? They are vexed by something else. Will the sniper see me? And if he does, will he pull the trigger?
Well, shortly before we came on air, in Moscow, the US ambassador personally handed over Washington's written response to a sweeping set of security demands made by Russia. Moscow wants NATO to pull back all forces from Eastern Europe and to agree to never admit Ukraine, demands Washington have said are unacceptable. So what do we know of the American response in detail? Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, is in Kyiv with the latest. Lindsay.
Krishnan, we don't know exactly what's in the document because the Americans were clear. Diplomacy should happen behind closed doors. They don't want to reveal everything. But we do know, as you say, they're very unlikely. They're not going to agree to saying by treaty that Ukraine will never join NATO, even less that countries which joined NATO 20 years ago are going to pull their NATO troops back. That's not going to happen. So what are the Americans offering? Well, some kinds of security guarantees for Russia, also some kind of arms control talks. These are not things that the Russians really want. And at the same time, the US Secretary of State was clear that they're continuing to provide defensive weapons to Ukraine. 3 consignments in the last few weeks, more to come. So it's hard to see that that is going to satisfy President Putin. At the same time, there's diplomacy going on in Paris at the moment at a lower level. And it's very interesting how this is playing out publicly. Here in Ukraine, on the television, it's the top of the news. In Russia, it's way, way, way down the running order. Many Russians may not be aware just how big a crisis this is. And the pictures that you're about to see, put out by the Russian Defense Ministry, those are very much not for domestic, but for foreign consumption. War in the dead of a Russian winter, or maybe just military exercises. The Russian Defense Ministry is pumping out pictures, these of the 105th Motorized Rifle Division, just a few miles from Ukraine's eastern border. In the face of the relentless build-up of Russian forces, the US today delivered its response to President Putin's demands.
Our response to Russia reflects what I said in Kyiv, Berlin, and Geneva last week. We're open to dialogue. We prefer diplomacy. And we're prepared to move forward where there is the possibility of communication and cooperation if Russia de-escalates its aggression toward Ukraine, stops the inflammatory rhetoric, and approaches discussions about the future of security in Europe in a spirit of reciprocity.
Most Russian parliamentarians agree with their government that NATO must never admit Ukraine and should pull forces back from other former Soviet bloc countries.
Если конструктивного ответа не последует и Запад продолжит свой агрессивный курс, то Москва, как не раз заявлял президент, предпримет необходимые ответные меры.
The American response, handed over by the US ambassador to Moscow this evening, is unlikely to satisfy the only man who matters, who chose to spend today in a virtual meeting with Italian business people, pretending nothing's happening, while courting those who might break threatened US sanctions.
Мы рассматриваем Италию в качестве одного из ведущих экономических партнеров. Ваша страна занимает 3-е место среди государств Евросоюза по уровню товарооборота с Россией.
In Belarus, on Ukraine's northern border, the Russians are showing off their aerial capability. Any attack would likely start with taking out Ukraine's air defences, followed by the bombardment of critical infrastructure. In the face of all this, the Ukrainian government is sounding remarkably phlegmatic.
It poses a threat to Ukraine, a direct threat to Ukraine. However, at the moment, as we speak, this number is insufficient for the full-scale offensive against Ukraine along the entire Ukrainian border.
By land, by air and by sea, Arctic drills for the Russian Navy up in the Barents Sea, purportedly guarding shipping lanes, making it clear that this crisis extends far beyond Ukraine, that President Putin has chosen this moment to challenge the entire post-Cold War order. Here in Kyiv, they commemorate the 14,000 Ukrainians who've been killed since Russia annexed Crimea and effectively occupied the east of the country 8 years ago. How many more will die, they fear, if Ukraine is crushed between giant forces beyond its control?